Good morning, everyone. I hope you are doing great today. Thank you very much for joining our webinar. Just before we start, a quick technical check. Would you please, either by a show of hand or a message on the chat, let me know if you can see my slides and you can hear me well, see my camera too, if you don't mind.
Hello?
Hello, most welcome.
Yeah, we can hear you very well. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for joining. While you were joining, I was playing a short video on the history of Merck Training and Consulting. I know some of you are much aware about the company, so I thought that sharing it in a different way today would be nice too. So welcome to this webinar. As you know, it is entitled "From the Classroom to the Workplace: How to Maximize the Learning Transfer." We definitely know that this is the topic of high interest, especially nowadays as companies try to really uh, take care of the investment in learning. They try to make sure that whatever they offer is becoming beneficial, is having a high return on investment. And I'm certainly sure that since most of you, or maybe all of you, are in the training and development field, we always wonder how much of what people learn in the classroom gets retained, how much of what we will learn in the classroom will be really used in the workplace, and the individuals and the companies are benefiting from them. So that's why I chose today to share with you not much theories, but some practices of what I had the chance to do in my career. I'm gonna certainly put it in a kind of scientific framework that would allow you to take those examples not as uh, a practical direct use only, but to capitalize on it and move forward with your own as well. So, this area of operation and training allows lots of creativity and allows lots of customization, all depending on your audience, your topic, and your organization, and the resources that you have in your hands as well. So, as I said, I'm gonna gladly share my experience, how I came by learning those methods, um, and then at any point in time, as usual, for those of you who are not attending for the first time, you know really well that whenever you have a question, please just pop it into the chat box, and I would be answering your questions gladly in due time. So that's a little bit of an introduction about the webinar. Um, as you know, Merck Training and Consulting has been venturing in virtual learning since 2011. And since 2019, now we are offering all our services on virtual learning live training basis, whether it is on public front or on in-house customized learning fronts, or even on short skill-based snippets that companies might be interested in. A little bit of introduction about myself. My name is Rabi. I'm a senior consultant with Merck Training and Consulting, working mainly in technical HR training, leadership development, journeys, and HR solutions. During my career, I taught HR in universities. I had the opportunity to serve in the GCC region and in the MENA region in capacities of learning and development and in talent development. Academically, I hold a master's degree from the University of Leicester in HR management and training. I have a master's in education and currently finishing up my CIPD level 7 diploma in advanced human resources. So that's it for the introduction. I don't want to take much of your precious time. And let's move right ahead towards our topic. And talking about learning, there should be a discussion about our memory, how much we retain of what is shared in the classroom. And certainly when we say classroom, we don't exclusively mean the physical classroom. A classroom can be virtual, like the one that we are having right now. But any kind of learning transfer certainly goes through our memory. So having said that, let's explore a little bit what about our memory that we need to know. First of all, I'd like to refer to the infamous model of Donald Kirkpatrick of the 4 levels of learning evaluation. And what you definitely know is that Kirkpatrick offers 4 levels. The first one starting with the reaction of participants or how much they enjoyed learning, to how much they acquired learning, to how much they took it into implementation in level 3, and finally how this change in behavior uh, has been reflected on the company most viable indicators. However, what I would like to highlight about Kirkpatrick model is something really interesting, which is the assumptions that he took while developing the model. And there is an upward vertical assumption in the model that we need to be very much aware about, although it has been criticized academically. The assumption that uh, is within the levels of the Kirkpatrick model states that to move to a higher level, one needs to satisfy all the others. So learning does not happen without high level of reaction. Impact does not happen without high levels of both learning and reaction, and results don't happen without the satisfaction of the 3 first levels. So what we are talking about right now, as we mentioned, the transfer of learning from the classroom to the workplace, you definitely know that the first 2 levels will happen in the classroom, while the other 2 levels will happen in the workplace. So how do we ensure the change in behavior is related to how we ensure that we are retaining the learning that we are acquiring in the classroom? So having said that, you know that we experience after learning what we call the forgetting curve. The forgetting curve explains that within 1 hour, people forget almost 50% of the information that you have presented. And within 24 hours, they would have forgotten almost 70% of this information. And after a week, it might reach a soaring level of 90%. So after a week, 10% of what was shared in the classroom or in a lesson is forgotten. How we can address that? To start addressing the memory loss, I would suggest 6 strategies to begin with. Mostly, uh, those strategies will apply in the planning of training and the design of the training itself. If I would like to retain information, I would love to do just-in-time learning. Now, what is the most relevant example for that is an example from the kitchen. I like to cook, and you know that sometimes my kids would ask for something that I don't know how to cook. And certainly, what I would do is to go to an Instagram page or a YouTube channel and just search for this specific recipe. When I would search for the recipe, certainly just as I'm cooking. So my learning is just in time. Certainly, when you are planning for a large organization, you cannot do this like effective immediately, but at least you can plan it to be as close as possible. And as we know, the availability of online resources nowadays for virtual learning, for self-led learning, are allowing further uh, provision of just-in-time learning. Because if you learn and then you go apply right away, your chances of increasing the retention is much, much higher. So that's the first way of making sure our learning will transfer to the workplace. So if you are going to train your line managers on interviewing skills, that should happen as close as possible to a recruitment campaign. It shouldn't happen at a floating time within the training calendar, because as we said, in 1 week they will forget the information altogether, or at least 90% of it. Now, in the classroom, it's very important to know that visuals and stories really help the retention of information. And that's why nowadays we try to come up with visuals, with vivid images, with pictures that would really ignite the memory so it wouldn't fade away quickly. Stories have been proved to be very powerful tools in transmitting messages. Certainly, you cannot come up with a story for every training topic because that would not be practically possible. But expert and veteran trainers have their own stories, and they know that they leave much impact. Now, one thing that is a rule of thumb is the repetition. So we need to come up with ways of repeating the same information that we shared in the classroom again and again after the classroom and even during the classroom training, in order so people would remember it and they will somehow move it from their short-term memory to their long-term memory. The sixth strategy is always offering engaging sessions, because when people discover learning, they would be more engaged and then they will retain the information because they will recall the process of discovering this information. Now, unfortunately, this is not always emphasized in the self-led ready-made or recorded videos online. That's why we will need to really choose the blend of learning methodologies depending on the topic that we are offering. So that was a high-level kind of strategies to avoid or at least minimize the memory loss, which is causing the information to fade. So as you can see, to foster the transfer, we are uh, or we have three areas. The first one is designing the training effectively. The second one is using refreshers after the training. And the third one is allowing room for application and implementation. In this webinar, I will not address the training design because it's not within the scope nor within the time frame. However, I would like to mention that whenever you have suitable ILOs, instructional learning objectives, whenever you choose the right medium to transfer the learning, by medium I mean when to use a role play, when to use a case study, when to ask people to analyze data, when to go for a knowledge acquisition test, etc., etc. And certainly, as you might know, in instructional design, we have always, by the end of every learning episode, an opportunity for assessing the learning acquired. But again, my main focus should be on refreshers and application on this webinar today. And for refreshers, I would like you to always remember that to be effective, refreshers would be frequent, focused, and fun. I'll give you some examples of these right away, but imagine refreshers are like stimulations for the participant's memory on several occasions after the training that might go for 1 year post the training that happened in a classroom, for example. So it's gonna be like hammering participant with those much important piece of information that would make them never forget what they learned in the classroom. So they need to be frequent, but not on the same method. And here where our creativity comes very handy. They need to be focused. So every training has some key messages that one would like people to remember, and they would be triggers for every other piece of information shared there. And it's very important to be fun because you don't want to position it as another learning burden for participants, especially if they are busy or they don't have much time to invest on those areas. In implementation or application, certainly those need to be planned ahead. They need to be monitored mainly by the line manager, and they need to be measured for effectiveness. So this is what I'm going to focus on during this webinar. And again, I would like to welcome those of you who joined us a little bit late today. I hope you can hear me well and see me well. And I would like to remind you once again that if you have any question in mind, please feel free to pop it in the chat box, and I will be more than happy to answer it in due time. So let's move to the practice. As I said, I'm not going to spend much time on theories. I only had some guidelines to share, but I'm going to share with you right away what could be a practical way of delivering those tools that would allow participants to transfer the learning to the work. So first, let's address those things that would refresh the learning, or the level 2 in the Kirkpatrick model. Many people, many training organizations, many training departments would avail lots of reading material, or at least the slides of a certain training after the training or even during the training itself. Now, for sure, when a participant would receive a deck of slides of 300 slides filled with information, they will not have an appetite to go through them all. But as we said, in every training, there are some visual or visualized models that would ignite our visual memory and help us remember all the related information. So I would like to invite you to move from slides to infographics. Now, this does not mean that you don't share the slides. Why not? To avail detailed information for those who need it, and that would be very handy in due time. In fact, it will resonate very well with our just-in-time learning approach. On top of that, if you can design small cards or small visuals, the ones that we call infographics, that would summarize the main ideas of the training and share it, as we said, frequently without information overload. I'm sure you know that in 2021, our attention span is very, 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 very short. And having said that, unless you have a very important communication by writing, you will just skim it for a couple of seconds and then leave it away. So one needs to be very selective in the information we share. That's why instead of designing one infographic that covers the whole course, let's design 10 infographics that would cover bits and pieces of the course itself. And then have a communication plan to share those small visuals or visual information with the participants. So every time you send a reminder, you reignite the memory, and hopefully the information will be recalled and then moved to the long-term memory. So the tips that I would like to share here: first, always make it visual, colorful, impactful. Second, always send it one by one. Don't put it all together in one infographic and then send it. Don't use all your cards, as we say, at once. And then you will have to find ways to use the internal communication channels that you have in the organization. You can post them on portals. If you have internal comms, if you have a monthly newsletter, if you can add them to the signatures of the training department, you can ask someone to share it with someone else. You can print them on giveaways, maybe like coasters or mugs, stress balls, small posters that you can display on the office, anything that would help people remember the information. I used to deliver lots of training and use those tools, and I have seen people that kept some posters hung on their walls for years and years, and they kept referring to it very, very nicely. So that's a very powerful tool. If you have internal display screens, why not also display from time to time some of those information? So this way you create an indirect communication plan to your learning content, so it gets more and more discoverable, discussed. Maybe you can use the cafeteria, maybe you can create a table of discussion during lunch where you distribute those giveaways, and then people just informally would share uh, one piece of information or two in this regard. So that's one way of capitalizing on the learning acquisition in preparation towards the transfer to the workplace. Another idea is to move from exams to contests. Now, what do I mean by that? Again, as you notice, I have entitled those slides as traditional refreshers repackaged. We're not reinventing the wheel right now. All what we are doing is taking our learning methods and packaging them in a more fun, interactive, and uh, engaging way, so people would really be interested in being part of it. So traditionally, we have used post-course exams to evaluate the learning acquisition. Now, why not make those exams fun? You know that there are many platforms right now that allow people who are undergoing multiple choice exams to compete, like Kahoot, for example. So I'm going to share with you a best practice that we had discussed with a client recently. They were undergoing a cultural transformation project and wanted to deliver a training on the values of the organization for around 7,000 employees. So for that, our suggestion was that after the training happens, we're gonna do some kind of a competition with qualification rounds, where, like, for example, the first 100 would compete together and you take the top five, then the other 100, and then, etc. Then you take those maybe 250 people to 70 people and you undergo with them another competition on a more difficult level, and etc. until you reach a like the top 3 or the top 10. You make a big noise out of it. People will discuss it. People will remember the information based on that, will post about it on social media, and then this will leverage the learning itself. Remember, fun is not the aim. Fun is the way through which we aim for the learning to be retained. And by the way, instead of embarrassing people by asking them to undergo an exam, then this is an exam by the end of the day. But it is not delivered in a threatening way. And for that, people would be welcoming it, enjoying it, and engaging in it as well. Certainly, you can deliver leaderboards, communicate those, uh, make a noise out of it. Maybe if you have some like very minimal budget, to give some uh, like, tokens of appreciation, not necessarily um, a 2021 luxury car. It's not the way that we want it to happen. We want to keep focusing on learning, otherwise people will abuse the game itself. So that's the second way of focusing on the or dealing with memory loss. The third way of dealing with memory loss is transforming another yet classical tool that we kept on using for a while. So many companies would ask participants that go and attend a certain course to uh, come back and present some kind of knowledge summary for their colleagues. Why not making out of this a platform for presentations. Why not doing something like TEDx or like Toastmasters, where once in a month you choose 5 people of those who attended trainings. You choose maybe the most interesting trainings or those trainings that not many people had the chance to attend. And then you ask those 5 people to come and do a certain short, brief, engaging presentation. You will practice they will practice their presentation skills, and in the same time, that would be a great idea of giving the platform for employees to share their information and uh, and do that in a very engaging way. If people are not into verbal communication, you can ask them to do written communication. Maybe they would like to write a small article about it, or maybe to draft a story about it, or maybe they would like to take a 2-minute video or a 5-minute extended video on what they have learned, share it with others, and then keep it on the platform for everyone to access it and to use it nicely. So those were uh, three ways that you can leverage memory retention and like enhance the level 2 of the Kirkpatrick model somehow. Now, before we move to the from knowing to doing section and bridging this gap through some practices, I'd like to allow you 1 minute if you have any questions that you'd like to pop in the chat box before we pursue forward. And if you feel like using your microphone, please feel free as well. Either way would work nicely. All right, so as it seems we're good to go. Moving forward, I would also suggest some ways of moving from learning to doing. The first one is transforming the learning objectives of a training into performance objectives, and I would like to call this the line manager intervention. For sure, this is something that cannot be done if the line manager is not part of it. And if I ask you just by uh, curiosity, please, on the chat, would you write to me the percentage of managers, line managers, who would sit with an employee before they go to a training and agree with them on what change in behavior they expect from them after the training happens? What is the percentage of managers that would do that with their employees? So as you think about it, I'm going to repeat the question again. How many managers, or what is the percentage of managers that would sit with an employee before a training and agree with them on what behaviors they would like them to see change after they attend the training? So I'm getting some answers. Maher is saying not more than 30%. Sayed and Nuruddin are saying around 60%. 58. Oh, 58. That's very accurate. I don't know whether it was a typing mistake or maybe you would like to write 50. Kumar is saying not more than 5. I don't have studies about that, but in my experience, they're not more than 10, in my own experience. On my evaluation sheets and trainings that I used to use in my jobs as a training manager, there was always a question: have you met with your manager before the training and agreed on the outcome? And not more than 10% of the managers used to do that. Regardless, this is a very important step and need to be really capitalized in trainings. And to do that, you need to teach those managers to transform the learning that is happening in the training venue to some performance objectives. And here you go, 3 examples that I would like to share with you. Now, a typical learning objective of a negotiation skills course is that by the end of the training, participants will demonstrate the ability to create added value proposition in negotiating with clients. Now, this is a learning. This is a skill that they might use. But how should this impact the workplace? This participant needs to be able to reduce the average discounts offered to clients by 5%. So if an average, he is offering 15% in discounts for clients, now by the end or after the training, he needs to make sure that the average is 10 instead of 15. And again, as a training manager or a training professional, you cannot do this shift from learning to performance. This is the job of the line manager. If, for example, the training is about leading people and there was a part about providing constructive feedback for poor performers, then the performance objective would be to improve the performance of poor performance team by 20% by end of year. The learning objective of a conflict management course would be using open-ended and closed-ended questions effectively in conflicting situations. And then in case of handling objections from clients, we would like to increase the closing rate by 3% through handling objections via the questions that you ask. So when the employee has visibility on what kind of outcomes he is expected to bring back from the training, even his questions during the training session will be more loyal to the workplace, would be more practical to what he or she does in the day-to-day operation. And then the learning, at least they could get some practical advice from the subject matter expert who is delivering the training itself. So the first method to leverage the transfer from the learning to the workplace is the line manager intervention, transforming the learning objectives to performance objectives. The next or the second tool I would recommend to use is to design work-related projects that employees or attendees would implement after the training itself. I've done this so many times. I recall that in one of my programs, I delivered a course for line managers called HR for non-HR managers. And it was a 1-year-long program. By the end, we had amazing projects implemented on leadership development front, on employee engagement front, and on employment relation front. We have ran some questionnaires. We have seen that really we had lack of awareness when it comes to the labor law, to the internal code of conduct that we had. And then we ran some programs to make sure that we increase this kind of awareness. It was beautiful. So those projects can be on team basis or individual basis. They are mostly successful if you give for every team an internal sponsor. usually from the top management, that would guide them through the way, make sure that their project is contributing positively to the business, and why not, in some cases, provide some additional resources. Maybe they would like to buy some research, some tools, some articles, some software that would be within the budget. Again, that would be very important. Thirdly, work-related projects are best done when they are presented for a panel for evaluation by the end of the development journey. I had one of those programs. The panel was consisting of the CEO, the Chief Operating Officer, uh, and the CFO, and also two general managers of the group, and it was marvelous. The impact on the panel was, in fact, very surprising. They couldn't expect such kind of great job from the employees, and it was a great opportunity for leveraging learning in the organization as well. So some ideas on what kind of projects you might give on several training topics. If you are delivering a training on communication, then a project would be to measure listening skills of team members and have weekly practice short sessions for the attendees or for other colleagues for 3 or 4 months. You can ask people from the organization to volunteer to take an assessment on their listening skills, and then be part of uh, ongoing practice session for maybe every 2 weeks for half an hour for 2 to 3 months. That would be absolutely beneficial, and they will have the chance to practice listening skills. And especially if you bring a department together, then this would have massive impact on the way they communicate and on their trust-based relationship. Another idea for a project on communication is maybe developing a code of ethics for meetings and emails. You know, uh, if you don't have an internal code of ethics when regarding written communication, internal written communication, people might use this um, not really ineffectively. So why not, after a training on communication, to ask 2 or 3 people to draft some code of ethics where they say that BCCs are not allowed, uh, never send an email at 2 a.m., for example. Make sure make sure that you don't copy people unnecessarily, just to like threaten them or abuse your source of power, etc. uh, Never share confidential information, stuff like that. If you're doing presentation skills, then maybe you can ask some of the participants to develop observation sheets and establish like feedback sessions for those who are presenting in the organization. So imagine you will have an internal presentation skills coach. Again, this does not have to be a permanent job. It can happen for a couple of months just to ensure that those participants have acquired their presentation skills and used it on the job, and then you can just leave it away, because this will move to a long-term memory. Then they will never forget it. Just when, like, you learn how to ride the bike when you are very young. Even if you leave the bike for 50 years and then you try to drive the bike, then you will be able to do that. Your system, your neurons will remember this very quickly. The other project would be running internal TEDx-like events, like one I described before. If, for example, you're having a training on health and safety, you can ask people to volunteer as short-term safety officers patrol the company ensuring safety guidelines, or you can develop safety trainers to deliver ongoing sessions for newcomers on the basics of safety. Maybe they will save you some money, they will enjoy that, and they will contribute to the safety of the organization. And if this would also reduce the number of incidents, that would be absolutely marvelous. So that's another way of delivering projects, another way of transferring learning to practice. The first one, as we said, it's the intervention of line manager. The second one is the project itself. Yes, and Nuruddin, I cannot agree more about the study you're sharing. Seeing people unnecessarily is somehow workplace bullying. Some people, I know that some multinational companies, if they send emails to each other during weekends and vacations, they will be penalized big time. So yes, that seems a great project for a communication training as well. The third way to transfer learning to the workplace and to implementation is to provide a kind of group or an individual coaching and mentoring sessions after the training. So this, you don't have for that to hire a certified coach and pay a fortune for that. When you train adults, then they have enough maturity to undergo peer learning events. And in this case, after a certain training, you can invite attendees for a short discussion, maybe 30 minutes or 1 hour, to monitor their progress, to discuss the challenges, to celebrate success milestones, to share some success stories that they had in implementing the training, and maybe to develop some practical solutions for that. I applied this when I was delivering a program on emotional intelligence with my previous employer. And I had like recap sessions on sharing best practices. They were honestly amazing. Now, certainly, not everyone attended. So if I had 20 people in the course, 12 or 13 would attend the follow-up session. But that's great. 5 is enough. It's only half an hour. And we could agree on a time together. They could discuss, they could share what works, they could share what doesn't work because of the culture in the organization. They would share what would work because of the culture. They would share what happened incorrectly and how they came up with solutions. I had some participants who shared like very impressive stories, like changes in their attitude, in their behavior after this emotional intelligence course. That's why I'm recommending this as a very nice tool for the implementation itself. So this way, ladies and gentlemen, we reach the end of this webinar. I hope you enjoyed your time. You took some practical tools to leverage learning in your organizations. Anybody has a certain question or something to add, some comments, maybe that you'd like to share before we wrap up? So I'll allow you a couple of minutes if you would like to share your questions on the chat. Uh, so Sareen is asking about the biggest motivator for employee. And as a matter of fact, there is no one size fits all motivator, Sari. Science shows that there are two kinds of motivation, the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. People might be very motivated for a hobby and they might pay for it, in fact. And there are some things that would motivate them externally. Certainly, monetary rewards are very important, but they are not everything. That you can share recognition, you can offer some opportunities to learn, some career development aspirations. That would be some good motivators, but there is no one size fits all. Albert is saying the real challenge is measuring the change in performance or the ROI of training. Um, well, measuring that change in behavior is sometimes more difficult. If you reach the ROI level, sometimes you can bypass the change in behavior and go directly towards the ROI. I hope I answered the question. I hope I understood it correctly, Albert. Maher is saying, how can you motivate line manager to follow up on? Yeah, that's the most important question, Maher. For that, first of all, be nice. That has been always and always my most successful rule of thumb. Have lots of empathy to know that line managers cannot spend a month out of a year answering your emails and filling your templates. So you need to be very selective on that. You don't have to do this line manager intervention on all the trainings that their employees attend. That would be shooting yourself in the head. All right? Don't do that. Choose those programs that you really need outcome out of. Be supportive for those line managers and help them while doing that. All right? And then they will be your advocates in the organization. Now, a word to say very honestly, some 15% of the managers will never be motivated to do that regardless of what you do. And that's okay. All right, my friend, I hope I answered your question too. Sure. Just before we wrap up, again, I would like to invite you to stay in tune for future webinars. If you would like to add me on LinkedIn just to always be in touch and know about upcoming webinar, this is the way I spell my name. If you would like to keep in touch, I'm also gonna share my email address with you. If you would like to receive a copy of those slides that I shared today, please state your interest in an email and I will get back to you right away. If you would like to contact me over mobile, this is my mobile number. We can have a chat at any time you like. And I would recommend, if you would like to have a really deep dive on all things related to training and development, implementation, measuring the ROI, we are offering by the end of this month a 5-day certified course for training and development professionals. If you would like to have a look, you can go to our website, get in touch with us, and we would be more than happy to serve you either on individual level or on group level. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining today. It was a great pleasure. I'm gonna wish you a great weekend. Please stay safe, adhere to all the measures, wash your hands frequently, sanitize your hand whenever you cannot wash them, keep safe distance, wear your mask, and always make sure to continue learning. Thank you very, very much, and hopefully we will see you very, very soon.
merc.com.